What's going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode of Mikase Sukase. And I am your host, as always, Niko House. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. I hope that everybody is having a fantastic day. And of course, as usual, I want to thank my patrons from Patreon. You all make this daily journey / struggle / just privilege. You make it possible every day and every month by making those donations, and I greatly appreciate it, and so does everyone on the network. The website, like I said, is only possible because of you all. Our growth thus far has only been possible. The fact that I can do this full time now, and we've been at this for now full 2 months, full time, and the growth has been unbelievable, and I know that we're going to grow more thanks to you all. So as usual, I want to give a special thanks to my patrons. Today we are going to talk about this ridiculous article by The Independent, and it's not necessarily The Independent's fault. So let me premise by saying that it was just a poll that was taken. Now, here's what I will say. Everybody has their careers. So people have to write. If that's what you do, you have to find topics that people are interested in, and this is a topic that people would be interested in. However, I feel like it's fallaciously portrayed, and I think it needs to be critiqued. And I'm going to explain why I feel the need to critique this, and I think other people should as well. Now, it was originally published in The Independent by Emily Sugarman, probably Sugarman, maybe Sugarman. I don't know. I'm not good with pronouncing names. Actually, I am good with pronouncing names, but I'm only good at pronouncing Asian names. So like Korean, Chinese, Japanese. Funny enough, I'm good at pronouncing Jewish names. Long story. And that's pretty much, and obviously in Latino names as well. So but other than that, I'm not that good at pronouncing names. Like just general American names, I suck at pronouncing them. But the title of the article is Donald Trump ranked the worst president in U.S. history by nearly 200 political scientists. Now, I know a lot of you probably just jumped out of your seat like, I know that you did not just say that. And some people, people probably jumped out for a couple of different reasons. The first reason, if you're a Trump fan, you're probably like, oh, that's stupid. Look at what he did with Syria. Look at what he did with this. And that's true. Trump is not the first person to be blatantly and openly racist. Nor was he the first person to be blatantly and openly racist during the presidency. Or like while he was running for presidency. There was somebody who was actually going to win. He was from Alabama. I wish I can remember his name. I can't remember his name right now. I'm going to remember in a second, though. And he was actually going to win before he was assassinated in Alabama. He ran on literally restoring segregation. I'm not talking about Goldwater, but he's also another person who ran on restoring segregation. So he wasn't the most racist, to be honest with you. Sounds crazy to believe, but he wasn't. And the other people probably are minorities, specifically black people who are like, are you shitting me? Did Trump restore slavery? Was he the one in power whenever slavery existed? Because those were things, right? Slavery was a thing over the course, 200 years of our nation's history. And then even before that, mind you, obviously the South wasn't as developed, but we did have presidents before George Washington. Funny enough, because a couple of them were, well, I think one or two of them were black. Yeah, it's true. Well, matter of fact, let me see if I can find the name of the person who was the first black president. But yeah, that's actually an interesting fact. I don't know if a lot of you know that. But let me see. I'm going to figure that out right now, because I always forget his name, and I should. The U.S. I learned that in college. Oh, actually, I think there were 7. There's no way. I thought it was only 1. So there were actually 7 black presidents. So there was John Hanson, a quote unquote Moor. He was president from 1781 to 1782, and he was actually the first president of the United States. And he was black. So John Hanson I didn't know about. The new country was actually formed on March the 1st, 1781 with the adoption of the Articles of Confederation. And then this document was actually proposed on June 11th, 1776, but not agreed upon by Congress until November 15th, 1777. Maryland refused to sign the document until Virginia and New York ceded their western lands. Maryland was afraid these states would gain too much power in the new government from such large amounts of land. That's actually pretty ironic because New York clearly does have a lot of influential power based on how the government is set up, and even Virginia has a good amount of power as well. So, but yeah, so that was actually the first black president. Fun fact for the day. But once the signing took place in 1781, the president was needed to run the country. John Hanson was chosen unanimously by Congress, which is crazy to think about. But the Northeast was simply, they had their quibbles between themselves. So like if you encroached on their land as another ethnicity, like, obviously the Irish had their issues when they got here. The Italians had their issues when they got here. The Scottish had their issues when they got here. Sicilians had their issues specifically with the Italians when they came here. So, so that was common. But in the Northeast, especially amongst the educated people, and when I say educated, I mean formally educated people, not racism, I won't say that. But, well, yeah, actually, racism as a power structure didn't really exist as much in the Northeast because that's where all the people of money, power, and prestige and educational background all moved to whenever they came to the U.S. And so they thought the idea of slavery was simply primitive, and they didn't, obviously, because if they wanted to institute slavery, they would have done it. Plus, slavery wouldn't have been as profitable. I'm gonna be honest with you, being in the Northeast. It wouldn't have been as profitable than it would have been in the South, or that it was, which really wasn't that profitable, but it's profitable for a few. Now, the John Hanson ordered all foreign troops off of American soil as president, as well as removing all foreign flags. He established the Great Seal of the United States, believe it or not. I'm not joking. I'm not making this up. He also he actually beat all of the other major candidates that were going to run against him. They refused to run against him because he was so popular amongst not only the Congress people in the Senate, but also amongst the people of the Northeast, which is obviously, they made up the dominant portion. What was it? The 13 colonies, obviously. So it wasn't that big of a country at the time, and he was extremely popular. So they actually decided not to run against him. And he actually, like I said, established the Great Seal of the U.S. He was huge in the American Revolution. He declared that the fourth Thursday of every November to be Thanksgiving Day, which is still true, which we know, obviously. Even though elected, one variable that was never thought through was that America was not going to accept a black president during the heart of the enslavement period. And then George Washington comes through. And then actually, it turns out that, which I didn't know, that Thomas Jefferson was actually black. He was actually a half Indian and half black. And that's why he had some black kids. However, because he was fairer skinned, he was considered white. And some people say that Abraham Lincoln was actually half black as well, which is where he got his bone structure, his incredible height, but I'm not joking, by the way. This is not an exaggeration. It's said that his mother is from an Ethiopian tribe, and that his father was potentially half African American, or at least a third African American, and that he is portrayed as fair skinned because obviously that would be considered more acceptable, but that, according to some historians, that is why Lincoln wore a hat a lot. So just to clarify that little portion of the story, little education side of the show, there were a few black presidents. I mean, just like I would say we've had like black people running, people automatically assume, because it's just the way that the culture has shifted. All people all say, Barack Obama is the first black president because one, his name is Barack Obama, but two, he's directly descended from first generation descended from Africa, and three, his skin is all over he embodies a lot of black culture. He has a black family and is unapologetically black as well. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, that's why I wanted to go ahead and clarify. But my point is that there's no way in hell that Trump is the worst president in history. Can't be. Not even close. Not even close. Not even top three. And I'm not exaggerating. And it doesn't matter. Like I said, I don't like Trump. I don't like him as a person. I don't like him personally. But I don't judge. I don't judge an institution or an office or a policy off of the demeanor of a person. I don't like Trump. But if he passes a good policy, I'll admit it. Like the tariffs, for example, where he's trying to protect American jobs, I'll admit that that's a good thing. That his isolationist policies that he is starting to re-enter into, I think that's a great idea because America doesn't know how to play well with others. We need to be put in a corner at this point, and it's costing us a lot of money. So I actually agree with Trump there, and I don't have a problem with saying that. And I said yesterday on my live stream, I was talking about the fact that there's so many people right now who they place so much faith in the person instead of objectively analyzing the institution. And the moment that you do that, you become your vision and your opinion becomes skewed and subjective, if that makes sense. So like, for example, I have no problem critiquing Bernie Sanders on Russiagate. Like, I don't like his rhetoric. I think it's frivolous. I think it's stupid. I understand, however, because I understand the institutions, that some of what he is saying is necessary because being raised in a time period where, well, no, not being raised in a time period, he was actively involved in politics during the McCarthy era, during the Soviet Union era, during the Red Scare. And one thing that he probably realized that anybody should realize now, let alone being raised in it, was that you don't get to run for office if you don't ride the red wave, if you will. And it's sad. It's unfortunate. He voted against sanctions, thank God, but it's truth. And so I understand the strategy in it because I understand the institutions that we're dealing with. See, that is an institutional problem that we need to solve. That is not a Bernie Sanders problem, although I would like it better if he didn't push the rhetoric so hard. But with people, when you fall in love with people and you don't have the ability to dichotomize the person from the policy, the person from the office, then you fall into these traps like this. Like assuming that Trump is the worst president in history, which is actually an insult to anyone who, just like I said, simply put, anyone who's a minority, for one. But let's read into the article. So nearly 200 American political scientists have voted that Donald Trump is the worst president in history. According to 2018's Presidents and Executive Politics Presidential Greatness Survey, Mr. Trump ranks even lower than the disgraced President Richard Nixon. Even among conservatives, Abraham Lincoln, unsurprisingly, takes the top prize. He takes the top prize amongst conservatives, by the way. Oh, no, excuse me. He takes top prize as in the most favored president, where Mr. Nixon sits at 33. So the study, conducted every 4 years, surveys social science researchers from the American Political Science Association's section on presidents and executive politics. It asked the experts to rank each president's greatness on a scale of 0 to 100. 100 being the greatest, 50 being average, 0 being a total failure. Now, I want you all to understand something. How can you rank a president's greatness a year and some change into office? Once again, I'm not saying that Trump is quote unquote great. I'm not saying that by any means at all whatsoever. But what I am saying is, if this poll was at all objective, it would rank the other presidents, including Obama, but it would actually account for the fact that Donald Trump has only been in office for a year and a half. And that fact alone should exempt him from being considered until he at least finishes 3 years. And because that's when he has to start, like he's going to obviously still be the president, but that's pretty much when they start campaigning again. Mr. Trump averaged a score of 12.34, bumping James Buchanan, the president who saw the U.S. descend into civil war, out of the top spot. The result comes months after Trump finished his first year in office. As the most unpopular president in modern day history, which I actually think is not true. Also, I mean, I'm just being honest with you. I'm fortunate to have a very mixed group of followers and subscribers and things like that. And guys, he's not as unpopular as what the media is portraying you to be. And if you are on the side of the fence where you want Trump to win, then you need to realize this. You need to realize this fast, because that's the same nonsense they tried to pitch to you all. Maybe last year, whenever Hillary Clinton had a 99.9% chance of winning, and he was so unpopular. And she was unpopular too, but she was a different kind of unpopular. People were just more scared of Trump. Listen, people, Trump is not unpopular. And I know it's hard to believe, but like, the guy is accused of sexual assault. I'll leave that up to the court, but the guy is accused of sexual assault. He is kind of an a-hole, right? He hires and fires as he pleases. He's an egomaniac. He pats himself on the back 2 times a day on Twitter, okay? He barely got any support or funding from the RNC, and yet he was the one who broke all the Republican registration records in the primary. So to believe, getting independents to join the party. So to believe that Trump is genuinely as unpopular as this article and other polls will try to portray him to be, that's silly, people. It's not accurate. And it's actually, this article, this poll and other polls show a serious lack in understanding of human psychology, the psychology of the citizens of the U.S., and just general sociology. They show that they're disconnected. And I think that most of you would agree with me. It shows that they're disconnected. Because I talk to people daily, whether it be on social media, whether it be on YouTube, anything really. I unfortunately, this is my life. I talk about politics all the time, unless I'm talking about basketball, unless I'm talking about life, which always devolves back into politics. Even basketball, for me, devolves back into politics. It's actually pretty funny. But for legitimate reasons, though, which when I start my sports podcast, you'll understand why. But listen, it's fact that Trump is more popular than what they're portraying him to be. He pretty much accepted an endorsement of the KKK, and he's still here. Like, people feel like there are white people who legitimately feel attacked. They feel like they're being punished for being white. And that resonates. There are also white people who really legitimately feel that Mexicans stole their jobs, which is kind of silly. Because they trust me when I say they don't want to do the jobs that Mexicans are doing. That's why those farms in California right now are rotting. But they feel like that, and Trump played on that. And politicians lie, so that's not a surprise. Trump promised to bring jobs back to the U.S. Did he do it? No, not really. But did that resonate with the working class? Yeah, it did. And they're so busy every day covering the things that Trump says, like the little the Haiti comment that he supposedly said. I don't know if he actually said it at this point, because now that everybody was asking for a transcript of the conversation, I'm not saying that he wouldn't have said it, but now that everybody asks for a transcript of the conversation, nobody can produce it. So, but they focus so much on what he says, on things like that, on him cussing and, him being just kind of crass. They don't talk about the things that really matter. They don't talk about the policies that he's failing at in some areas that really matter. Why? Because, well, the truth of the matter is both sides of the aisle want a lot of the policies that are, and when a lot of the are taking part in the failures of Trump, right? So before, whenever it was Syria, when Rex Tillerson was going back into Syria, Barack Obama started that, right? Let's be clear about that. Gun violence, for example, you know how much Barack Obama and Hillary both took from the gun lobbying groups? Oh, millions, people, millions. According to the IB Times, it was millions. But, gun violence is a Trump issue. Now, why do I feel the need to bring this up? Some people may ask that. And so, why are you critiquing the left so much? And why are you defending Trump? I'm not defending Trump. I'm defending the truth. Because, well, the reality of the situation is, people, well, some people, you might actually do this, but you shouldn't. Now, when you go over someone's house, say if your house may not be that clean that day, right? You had a long week, a little messy, a little dirty. You pop up on someone's house. They weren't expecting you, but they got a few clothes on the floor. A few dishes in the sink. Maybe they didn't vacuum well. They were a little dusty. They had a long week too. Do you critique their house, telling them everything wrong with their place when your house is dirty? Or do you say, hey, you know what? I understand. I had a long week too, but you know what? I'm going to clean up my house. I'm going to police my house, because there's no way that I can police your house if my house is dirty. And I consider myself a progressive, right? Progressives, apparently, we lean left. I feel like I'm a common sense progressive. I don't want to call myself a centrist, because that word has kind of been co-opted. But I'm in the center. I'm center left. So, for example, if you want to know like what that means. So I preferably would not like my child aborted if that issue ever came up. However, I do understand at the same time that is the woman's right to choose, because ultimately in the society we have today, the woman's body is going to be affected. Her life is going to be on the line. The burden oftentimes, because of how the patriarchy and how states' laws are set up, often falls on the woman time-wise, which takes away from their careers, which takes away from, their income. And yeah, we have to monetarily, because of the patriarchy, we have to pay into that. But that is not the same thing as time. You get what I'm saying? So, and my body is not going to be affected, except for daddy weight when they're pregnant, but my body is not going to be affected like a woman's would throughout a pregnancy. I have no chance of dying from having a child. You get what I'm saying? So that's an issue that I'm center left on. So, but if you ultimately ask me, I would say this is my opinion. I would prefer if you did not do this, because I feel like there are other options. And however, ultimately is your choice. Although I'll be pissed off with that decision, I will still support you, because being a mother is extremely difficult in every aspect of it, from the time that you're pregnant to the day you give birth to the moment they graduate. So that's an issue. Another issue is the gun issue, right? I don't own any guns. If I did, I would be shot at this point, as many encounters I've had with police officers. But I do understand why the Second Amendment was created. The government could and has been tyrannical. Every government. There have been governments that have attacked us where we had to form militias really fast and defend our borders. Long time ago, but still. Essentially, that's what the National Guard is. That's really what the National Guard is. The National Guard is the well-regulated militia. But that's a different conversation for a different day. Um, but I do not think people need to be walking around with AK-47s. I don't think there's a use for that. Okay, I just don't think that. I think they're fun to shoot, and I think that more people would admit that, then we would have less conflict in dialogue. People feel like, oh my God, you're saying that I don't like you don't like guns. Well, I need them to defend my country. No, you don't. Boy, you don't need you not firing off. If you fire off an AK in your home with other people in it and they're not all immediately behind you, then you are putting your entire family in immediate danger because them bullets are not a joke. Okay? Like you don't have an AT4 in your house, right? Like a rocket launcher. Um, so as far as Second Amendment is concerned, I do believe that it is necessary, and in some cases, because of the way our government has failed to protect us, the same way I feel like our police force has failed to protect us. In fact, they've been part of the cause with human trafficking. You want to protect your family with the drug issue on all fronts, whether it be within the black community or the different type of drug issues in the white community, where you feel like your neighborhood may have gone down south and you have to protect yourself because of the druggies. Like homelessness is an issue. Women who are homeless are getting raped every day, and so that's why I feel like it's cool to want to protect yourself because the government is funneling in guns through the black market and drugs through the black market and things to destabilize communities. Now, on the other side of that fence, I think there should be common sense regulations. And actually, I don't think I'm in a minority there. I think most on the left and the right agree with that. But this whole idea of banning weapons totally is silly to me because our society has certain privileges. I would call it the privilege of experiences, the privilege of diverse experiences, and there are great things that come from that. However, there are also bad things that come from that as well. A lot of bad things that come from that. Like conflicts, racial conflict, ethnic conflict, class, class conflict. So people are put in precarious predicaments because of that. Everybody feels the need to protect themselves. People react. They're reactionary. And so so that has been taken advantage of by some parties, some entities. Not going to say anything but the US government, and those fears are played upon. So people feel the need to protect themselves. So until we have a more united experience, then I would never agree to get rid of all the guns. And plus, that's just kind of silly, right? Because your everyday person, think about it. Mass shootings. Have you ever heard of a mass shooting in Compton? However, people were killed every day in Compton, right? Especially back in the day during the crack era, especially by cops. But you never heard of a mass shooting in Compton. The mass shootings are all in democratically elected, democratic dominant, high income, upper middle class to wealthy, white areas. And the NRA is blamed. I'm not a fan of the NRA, but the NRA is just an association, people. But I'm not a fan of the NRA though, but that's just the reality. But the NRA is blamed. However, I don't blame the NRA for what's going on in Compton. When I'm having a discussion, a good discussion, where we're trying to objectively ascertain what the issues are in like places like Compton. Compton's not as bad anymore. It's getting gentrified, unfortunately. But or like Durham, North Carolina, or Chicago or Fayetteville, we talk about economics, right? We talk about lack of opportunity. Talk about the lack of prosperity. And people have to find a way to make money. That's how it used to be in Brooklyn, Bronx. Lack of opportunity, lack of prosperity leads to these things because you have to protect what's yours. Mass shooting is not about protecting what's yours. That's a psychological issue. So then we have to start talking about how that particular group, upper middle class, is being denied health care because of finances. They're not having accurate. They're not able to have certain conversations because, especially amongst males. So if I'm not going to blame the NRA for Compton or for Chicago, where the guns that they lobby for are there as well. I mean, unfortunately, but they're illegally there. NRA advocates for legal rights. Now, granted, I'm not an idiot either. The NRA does not advocate for black people having guns. Okay, so let me just go ahead and clear that up. In fact, when Philando Castile was killed, the NRA guy said, oh, the cop had a right to fear for his life because Philando Castile smoked weed. So I want to make that clear, but I don't blame the NRA for that issue. That's silly. We have complex, our politicians have failed us at every level to deal with a lot of complex issues that lead to gun violence, no matter where there is. So I guess I would be considered center left on that. So my point is that if I'm going to consider myself progressive, center left, whatever you want to call it, then I have to keep myself and my party accountable. I am a black male. I keep black people accountable. Because one thing that infuriates me, probably more than anything in politics, is if you're a Republican or a conservative and you hear a Republican or conservative saying some ignorant stuff and you don't hold them accountable. You make excuses for it. You ignore it. Or in some cases, you even share it. You clap for it. You like the tweet. You share the tweet or retweet it. You like the Instagram post. You make excuses for why it's okay for them, for why it's okay for them to say some of the things that they do. And it's not okay. I am neither a Democrat nor a Republican. Why? Because I had a Republican in Kansas said that we can't legalize weed because black people will go crazy. I'm not joking. I'm not joking, people. Matter of fact, we can find his name right now, just so y'all can quote that later. Y'all can quote that later and tell him that I told you. Insane black. So this was reported in a few places. Raw Stories, GQ. He's a representative, actually. He's elected, an elected official in Kansas named Steve Alford, who said that black people can't handle weed because of genetics, people. So how did he get elected? Why? Because of Republicans, who are supposedly not racist, didn't hold him accountable. Now, on the other side of that fence, I understand there's different types of racism, and then there is implicit racism as well. Like kind of like a passive racism the Democratic Party displays. Sometimes they display active racism as well, but there's passive racism that the Democratic Party displays. The whole idea that black people need to wait their turns. Minorities only get called up when they feel like a white person would not be accepted for the job, whenever they want to portray themselves as being more diverse. So I'm not a Democrat either. Obviously, there's a whole thing about them being the part of the CIA. That's another thing. Because parties were created to protect not an idea, but interests. Parties weren't created to protect ideas. It's funny because when you think about it, people, the platform of conservatives sound pretty damn good. Hey, we should only spend when necessary. States' rights should not be infringed upon by the federal government when it isn't necessary. The states should only be allowed to grant more rights and more liberties, not restrict them. The Second Amendment is used to protect us from the federal government and from authoritative figures, no matter who they may be, to protect your body and yourself. It sounds great, right? But is that really what it is? Right? Think about it, people. They say they're against taxation. North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, they tax the hell out of people. They say they're against regulation. In fact, they have some of the highest state taxes. Now, California and New York do too, but they have higher state taxes because of higher populations. So they make sense proportionately and respectively. But like North Carolina, Virginia, and those places, no, hell no. They say that they're for less regulations. You ever try to get a driver's license in any of these states? Holy crap. It's ridiculous. They go out of their way to make it more difficult. They regulate where you can and where you can't smoke. And I'm not even a smoker. But they regulate that. They regulate women's bodies. They regulate everything. They try to regulate religion. They try to legislate religion. So yeah, they try to regulate where they try to regulate minimum wage, people. No, on the other side of that, the Democratic Party is supposed to be the party of the people. Yeah, okay. Yeah, see how it's working out? They sell us under the bus. They pitch us promises. But in reality, when you look at history, whether we're talking about the current Democrats, the contemporary Democrats, or if we're talking about the Democrats of the past who are known then as the Republicans, come on, people. They have not passed anything for us. Unless the 13th, 14th, and 15th, oh, goodness gracious. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were like small victories. I know it sounds crazy to believe, but Lyndon B. Johnson was forced to do that for self-interest. But he's a racist. He's a bleeding racist. And he got rich as hell off the Vietnam War. He also took full advantage of the police and surveillance state against black liberation groups and things of that nature. So think about, interracial marriage, for example. That wasn't passed by Congress. Jim Crow was ended because people literally went to battle over it. Hell, Guilford County in North Carolina was like the last state to get rid of segregation. Now, I don't think that happened until like maybe the early 1900s or the late 1800s. Like almost like 50 or no, excuse me, not segregation. No, segregation. It wasn't late 1900s or early 2000, because it turned out there was like still a school that was still segregated. They segregated their prom when I was still in high school. So 13, 14, and 15 amendments, even though those were ratified by Congress and the Senate, things like ending Jim Crow, before that started, before the amendments got ratified, interracial marriage, issues in the workplace. If you want to talk about equal rights for marriage, that was fought for by a couple. Interracial marriage is fought for by a couple, take it to the Supreme Court. Almost all those victories were fought for by the people. So the Democratic Party was pretending to be on your side, but never got anything done. And that is on. They're doing the same thing right now. They're pretending to be against gun violence and never get anything done. So I belong to neither of those parties, and I suggest that you don't either. I'm not saying don't work for a candidate who is trying to hold office who has great policies. But what I'm saying is the parties are meant to protect interests. And I have to critique the left for the same reason I expect the right to critique itself. I hope that becomes more popular over time. This article also makes this huge fallacy. I'm guessing that all these political scientists, like I said, they must be like older white guys, because I don't know if y'all remember one Andrew Jackson, for example, because they talk about greatness, right? This man, Andrew Jackson, supported Georgia being allowed to force Native Americans off of their land using the Indian Removal Act. Okay, he passed it in 1830. He even tried to supersede a Supreme Court ruling, Worcester versus Georgia in 1832, that said that the Native Americans couldn't be forced to move because they actually had like an established constitution. Like they did everything that was required for them to be considered sovereign, which this led directly to the Trail of Tears, which most of you are now familiar with. We barely learn about it in school. Some people don't even learn about it in school. And some people learn a false history about it. But that happened in 1838, 1839, and U.S.-led troops killed over 15,000 Cherokees from Georgia. Well, excuse me, they led over 15,000 Cherokees to reservations in Oklahoma from Georgia. They led. No, they went and they slaughtered people. They said that 15,000 Native Americans were removed and they died during the march. Yeah, that's revisionist history. And then there was Andrew Johnson, right? He's a pretty bad guy. It's crazy. These are political scientists. Maybe they should have asked historians, political scientists. I don't know what they're measuring for great, but obviously Andrew Johnson was the first to be impeached, and I'm not gonna say he pretended. He liked the Union only because of its ability to protect the poor white Southerners, and I'm not exaggerating. This is not something that I'm making up, people. He literally said, "Damn the Negroes, I'm fighting those treacherous aristocrats, their masters," as in the masters of the slaves. So yeah, just wanted to make that clear. And which is actually, believe it or not, something that I think is a battle that a lot of people fight today. There are people who like conservatives who I like to call them the Bernie Sanders conservatives to a point, because they believe in everything Bernie Sanders is fighting for until you bring up race, gender, or ethnicity, and then they jump ship on you. So, so yeah, there's that. Literally said, "Damn the Negroes," right? Then of course you have Reagan, who took money from the Treasury. Took money from Social Security to put back in the Treasury because, well, the country was going broke due to his trickle-down economics that he thought were going to work. Did not work. Nixon was by far worse than Donald Trump, because as much as Donald Trump says some nasty things, he's done nowhere near the damage to the black community as Richard Nixon nor Ronald Reagan. Then you have the Bush brothers, right? Bush started a war that has still not ended. Bush was the idiot that started a war on an idea, the war on terrorism. Imagine trying to start a war on niceness. You're never going to win. We're still fighting that war. When we started the war in Iraq, when Bush started the war in Iraq, the second one, I was in middle school. I was in 6th or 7th grade. I want to say 7th grade. No, I was in 6th grade. No, I was in 7th grade. The war in Afghanistan started when I was in 6th grade. War in Iraq started when I was in 7th grade. My brother, who was only a year and some change younger than me, went to fight in that same war. I did not deploy. I refused to. But my unit that I was in went to fight in that war. Do you see how crazy that is? Think about that. The war that we started when I was in the 7th grade. My sister is now old enough to fight in, who is 10 years, almost on the dime, younger than me. We killed millions of people in the Middle East over that. Do you see where I'm getting at? How are we measuring this? How are we measuring greatness outside of these numbers? Because I assure you that one thing that Trump has done is bomb more or way less civilians than Barack Obama has. Trump never fought against Nelson Mandela and the apartheid. Yeah. Trump never instituted a coup in Honduras or allowed it to happen. Trump never sold 20% of our uranium to Russia. Trump has said some pretty bad things. I'm not saying he's not ignorant. I'm not saying he doesn't say stupid stuff. I'm not saying that he hasn't passed some bad policies. I'm not saying that at all. But to try and pretend like he is the worst, it's laughable at best. So thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Like I said, we are back to our daily doses. So you're going to be getting the podcast daily from now on. Now that we got everything up and running for the most part. And so I'm glad that you all have still been tuning in. Make sure you donate to our Patreon if you have not. And always remember, ladies and gentlemen, find your balance. Peace.